Three. So is my presentation visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Uh, Okay. So today's, as I said, today's lecture is about testing of composites. This lecture is inspired by a very similar lecture that Professor Stepan Lomov had delivered a few years ago. So credit to him. Overall structure, etc., I have maintained as he had done, adding contents as and when I felt needed. Okay. So this is what we are going to discuss. Okay. The first question is why should we perform a test? What are the different reasons to perform a test? Then the next question is, when will you consider a test method a good test method and when it is considered an unreliable test method? After that, we will look at different type of tests that we do for composite materials, like how to do tension test, flexure, compression, shear, etc., etc. Okay. So why do we perform a test? There can be several reasons to perform a test. The first is that you want to develop a new material. If you develop a new material, you have to do tests. After the new material has been developed, you have to test it to see the material that you have developed is giving the desirable properties that you aimed for. This is one reason. The second reason can be to do some theoretical work, meaning that either as the starting point of theory is whether you want to make some assumptions, you want to understand what assumptions are feasible, what are not feasible, or for verification of your models. This is also a good reason to do a test. The third reason to do a test can be you want to compare your material with other materials. Should I use carbon fiber composites or should I use glass fiber composites? Or how does my glass fiber composite match with aluminum? So questions like that can be answered by doing tests. The fourth is input for design calculations. Design calculations means you are calculating effective properties or you are using it for your meso analysis. All of this will require inputs. To capture those inputs, you might have to do some tests. Remember, in our last lecture, we discussed how that even if material B might have better properties, but we still might go for material A if the entire material database is available for material A. That is sometimes a strong driving point for industries. So in that way, for design calculations, you need inputs, and for that inputs, you need to perform tests. Another reason could be prediction of performance in real life. Meaning, let's say you make a structure, you've deployed a material, made a structure. How is that structure going to behave in real life? That might also require some testing. And finally, you will have to do quality control and assurance. For example, if you make a part, again, let's go to our favorite sector, the aerospace sector, then it has to go for a certain kilometers or certain number of trips the aeroplane has to go before you will replace the part. Obviously, you will not be able to test every part before it is deployment, because if you test it is going to break, it can no longer be deployed. So selectively, you have to test some material just to see that the quality control is there, like maybe 1 in 10 or 1 in 100. So if you are deploying 100 structures, maybe 99 you will just deploy without 99 you will deploy by just visual inspection or non-destructive evaluation. The one you actually have to test and see that the quality that you wanted, the supplier or whoever the manufacturer is going to that. Okay, so these are some of the reasons why we perform a test. There can be other reasons also, but this gives you a fair idea of the wide reasons why we are doing a test. Now, then, so once we know why we are doing a test, the next question is the goal of the test. So these are the different goals of the test. We want to develop a new material, we want to do theoretical work, we want to compare with other materials, etc., etc. Once that goal of the test is determined, then you have to decide on what type of specimen are you looking for. Are you doing coupon level tests, or are you doing a substructure test, or are you doing the whole structure test? Then you have to also have to decide what are the environmental conditions. Is it going to be an accurate air conditioned lab control test where you are very carefully controlling the temperature and the environment? Or it is going to be a special hot wet condition where you are trying to make conditions which are very similar to the in-service conditions that the material might suffer. or you just do it real life where there are variations in temperature, variations, etc., etc. The third choice you have to make is what test equipment are you going to use? Are you going to use a general purpose machine or a dedicated structure test rig, or you are going to make a special machine only for your material test equipment? And then final and usually the most important decision you are going to make is how much data do you want from your tests? If I'm doing a whole structure test, the only data I need is whether is my design okay or not okay. If I am doing a coupon level test, then perhaps I want to capture the strain field. I would like to know the modulus. I'd like to know the Poisson's ratio. I'd like to know the strength. I'd like to know the mode of damage. So the data acquisition is going to be much more intense. Okay. So as an engineer, first you have to decide why you are doing the test. What is your goal? What is your objective? And once that is obtained, then you have to decide on these conditions. What is the specimen? What is the environmental condition? Which equipment? How much data are you going to collect, etc., etc. Okay. Any questions on this?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
So what is coupon level test?
Coupon level test is the test that you do. Coupon is a, so when you do tensile test, do you know what is a dog bone sample?
No, sir.
So basically you have something like this, no? This is a simple test specimen that you have perhaps used in your lab. You apply load like this. This is sometimes in the context of composite material, this specimen, the simplest flat specimen that you test for tensile tests or the other are known as coupons.
Oh, okay, sir. Okay, sir. Got it.
Okay, anything else? Let's go forward. Okay, so let's say you want to do the test for some offshore application. Let's say for some offshore applications, you want to use glass reinforced plastic. Okay, this is, and let us say that previously the offshore company was using aluminum or some other material. We want to use glass reinforced pipe. So what are the different tests we'll have to do? At first, we have to do lab scale tests. Okay. Lab scale test means we are going to go to a lab, use a universal tensile machine, and some of our objectives are going to be material selection. Is it glass reinforced plastic? What is the fiber volume fraction? Which manufacturing method? What is the material that we want to use? So this is our first objective. That will be our first objective. The second objective will be determination of strength, stiffness, and toughness. So you are going to do a coupon level tests, determine the strength, stiffness, toughness, as much data as you want to extract, because these are coupon level tests or lab scale tests. The third condition for this test is going to be that it has to be almost ideal condition. The moisture will be well controlled, temperature will be well controlled in the lab. Loading condition is simple uniaxial test you are going to do. It is going to be only one small simple shaped specimen. The specimen will be ideal. So you will take great care in making the specimen. There will be no defects. Your surfaces are going to be smooth. The machining is going to be perfect. The length dimensions, etc. You are going to be very, very careful. As opposed to if it was a real part, maybe you would not be so careful. And you have to do extensive data reduction. Extensive data reduction because you want to determine the strength, stiffness, and toughness. Okay. Mostly in an academic setting, this is the tests we do. We do lab scale tests. Okay. So after the lab scale test, let us say you have done your lab scale test, you have chosen your material, that you have developed a new material, you have tested it, and you are confident of its strength, stiffness, toughness, and you think that this is going to be a suitable material for our application. After that, you will do what is known as part testing. Part testing means that instead of the entire pipeline, you take a small section of the pipe and then you start testing that pipe, that small part. And this time, you already know the strength, stiffness, and toughness. You are going to do different type of tests for our part, which could be fatigue testing. Fatigue testing means the sample is going to be subjected to loading, unloading, or it increases up to a certain value, comes down, increases up to a certain value, comes down, etc., etc. You want to determine the burst pressure. This is so when you are going to part testing, you start doing testing which is specific to the application in question. Since we are doing for an offshore pipe application, burst pressure might be important. If it was some other application, we would not do a burst pressure test. Testing of the pipe joint. This is also very specific to the application that we are thinking about. So part testing, some tests are specific to the application that we want to consider. Once again, you'll do almost ideal conditions. It is going to be not simple, but rather simple. Like if it is fatigue, we'll go for sine wave, we'll not go for fancy loading. Specimen size is medium. You have limited number of components, almost ideal specimen preparation, and limited data reduction, not as extensive as you were doing for coupon level tests. At the end of your part testing, you will know that, so at the end of your coupon level test, you found out the material. At the end of your part testing, you will know that a certain part can be made out of that material. After everything, then you will make the entire structure and do a structure level testing. So here you will design the prototype. It will be almost real conditions. So you are not going to control moisture, temperature, let it be as it will be in real life. You can do very complex loading. For example, fatigue not equal to sine wave. It could be some crazy loading type. This is load, this is time. As opposed to in our previous test, we would have done this. So this is for my part. This is for my structure, because this load that you see at the top is the one you are more likely to get in a real life where the structure is under application. Okay, so the specimen can be very large. Then you can have many different components which have been joined together, and you want to test your entire structure where one new material has been employed for some application. The structure will be prepared as in real life. So whatever tolerances, errors are allowed for the real life structure, you also have to allow while doing your structure level testing. And in such cases, most of the times you will not do any data reduction. Basically, you will make a prototype of a real structure, test it, and the question you are going to answer is it okay or not okay? Okay, is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so once we know, so with this I've given you a very brief overview of what are the different reasons to do a test, what are the different characteristics of the different testing types when you are doing part level or structure level or material level tests, what are the differences, etc. Now, what is a good test method? Okay, so the most important criteria for saying whether a test method is good or not is the first bullet point. Result must be representative. What is the meaning of this sentence or this phrase? When we say that the result must be representative, it means what?
So it should deliver same result every time.
It should deliver same or similar. I mean, think of it like this. Let's say you are 40 students, okay? And if I randomly pick one test copy out of you 40 guys and say that, and let's say that student has got 20 out of 35. So can I say that the class performance is 20 out of 35 just by looking at one test copy?
No, sir.
You cannot do that, right? So we have to in this case, I would actually have to take at least 5 or 10, and then I would have to say what is the mean, what is the standard deviation. And even then, I cannot make this statement that, let's say out of 40, I take 10 copies, I say a mean and a standard deviation. Even then, I may or may not be able to say that in mechanics of composites, this is the performance every year. Why can I not say that? Can I say that or can I not say that? Let's say out of 40 of you, I pick up 10 copies randomly. I calculate the mean and standard deviation. And then I will say that in mechanics of composites, this is the mean and standard deviation. Can I make a general statement like that?
So for every year we can say.
Meaning, I will take 10 of your copies and I will make a blanket statement in mechanics of composites. This is the mean and standard deviation. Will that be a correct statement or not a correct statement?
Sir, not correct.
It is not correct because the tests that we have done to find out the mean and standard deviation are not standard tests. Every year we would have an online, we would have an offline pen and paper. And if year after year I maintain the same level of difficulty and all the time I do the same type of test, then I can say, okay, because I am the question paper setter, I am making more or less same level of difficulty. The selection criteria for you is same. Then I could have said, but in our special case, when the exams is online, then this statement cannot be made because this time the tests that we are doing are not standard tests. It is different from all the tests that we have been doing year after year. So we'll not be able to say. So just like the tests that we are doing and the exams that we are doing this year are not representative of the entire testing or assessment that has been going on for the last 20-30 years. Similarly, we should not pick a test method while testing a material which is not standard or which is not representative. For example, in this context, if I say that the tensile strength of carbon fiber composite is 100 megapascal, then it is 100 megapascal. I have to specify what composition was it, what is the shape, what is the size, thickness, etc., etc. And then the assumption is that in any part of the world, if somebody makes a carbon fiber composite with the same composition, same shape, same size, he should get the same number as I have got. So that number that I'm getting is representative. It does not depend on who did the tests, or it should not depend on which test equipment was done. It is only a property of the material. That is a good test. If I run into a situation where, let's say I go to the lab and I find out it is 100, and next day you go to the lab and maybe your skill levels are slightly lower than mine, you get 68 or the third person gets 132, then we are not doing representative test. Then the statement is, according to the test done by Atul, the strength is 100, or according to the test done by Hitesh, the strength is 68. Then the results are not representative because the person who is testing is becoming important. That should not happen. If that is happening, that is not a good test method. Okay. And when we are doing a test, we also have to specify temperature, humidity, loading condition. Okay. Because the properties are going to vary. So once you do a test, your result must be representative of all the different parameters. And it is independent of where it is tested, it is independent of which machine you have used, and it is independent of the lab technician. A material property is a material property. It is independent of the lab technician skills, or it is independent of the machine that you use, or it is independent of the coupon size that you have used. So when all of these conditions are satisfied, we will call it a representative test, and this is a good test method. Okay, that's why this statement, for basic testing, test result is equal to material property. It is not property of the lab. It is not property of the method chosen to test. It is like when I say Young's modulus of carbon fiber is 230 gigapascal, It doesn't matter who tests it. We should always get 230 gigapascal. Similar, because it is material property. So that number 230 gigapascal has been determined by a good test method. That's why we are able to say carbon fibers modulus is 230 gigapascal. Okay, but one important point is there is going to be some mean and standard deviation. Every time you test materials, there is going to be slight variation. So rather than imagining it as a number, it is number plus minus standard deviation. Okay, when is a test result is equal to material property? When is this happening? This will happen if the specimen dimensions are much bigger than the scale of homogeneity, meaning that if I draw the transverse cross section of a carbon fiber or any composite material unidirectional, I will see like this. Okay, now let's say I make a small sample whose size is only this blue line, and somehow I test it. Is the property of this blue box actually the property of my composite material?
No, sir.
It is not going to be, yes, because I could also take another blue box here, same size, and the fiber content is so low. The second blue box and the first blue box, the properties are going to be different. So we have to take a specimen such that the specimen dimensions are much bigger than the scale of inhomogeneity. So if my fiber's diameter is in microns, then my specimen should at least be few centimeters or few millimeters. I cannot do, if my specimen dimension is the same scale as the scale of inhomogeneity, then the material properties that I'm going to, the test result is not material property. Okay, this is one. The second point is there should be a uniform stress field, meaning, let's say this is my coupon. I'm going to test it like this. And more or less, it is this region which is going to be important for me. And we say a test is good if it breaks in the middle. Now, at every point in this area ABCD, the stress or the strain field should be uniform. If there are, let's say, if I do a test and if I test it like this, then I will not get the material property because in this region there is going to be stress concentration. Correct? Correct or not?
Yes, sir.
And
Yes,
this
sir.
and this stress concentration is going to be a function of what?
The dimensions of the notch.
It depends on the dimensions of the notch. So in this test that I have done here, let's call this test 3. The ultimate result that I get, is it material property or is it material property combined with the notch property?
Combined with the notch properties.
So I will, if I do that test, I'm not going the material property. So I should have a uniform stress field. The third is I should not have local damages. Meaning that, again, if there were cracks here in this region, this is not desirable. I don't want local damages. There should be avoidance of end effects. Now what happens now? You are going to clamp this Okay, so you are going to, your tensile test machine is going to hold it and the load is applied through the machine. What happens if there is if my sample breaks here? I was somehow holding the sample too hard and it broke. Then what will happen? Is the result that I am getting, is it due to improper testing or is it my material testing, material property?
Due to improper testing.
It is improper test, right? And so we want to avoid that also. And test result is equal to material property if it is operator lab machine independent. As I said, the numbers are numbers. It should not depend on who did the test, where it was done, etc., etc. If these conditions are satisfied, then you can say test result is material property. Okay? Any questions on this? If not, let's go forward. Okay, so till now, whatever we have read or whatever we have discussed in this class is independent of the type of material. Okay, whatever I said is true not only for composites, it's true also for metals. Now, for composite materials, what are the specific challenges that we have to consider? Okay, metals are isotropic. So if I say the strength of aluminum is so and so, it means the strength of aluminum. But I cannot say strength of composite is so and so because I have to specify. I cannot even say the strength of carbon fiber composite is so and so. I have to say what was the size of the fiber, what is the orientation, what is the fiber volume fraction. So the permutation and combination in composite materials are much high. What is the interface between the fiber and the matrix? Is the sizing of the fiber done properly? What is the laminate stacking sequence? All of these are specific to composite materials. When testing metals, metals are isotropic, homogeneous. So all of these material composition questions don't come. You will simply say the strength of material A is this. But while saying for composite materials, it is strength of composite material with this type of fiber, this orientation, this fiber volume fraction, this fiber matrix or interface, and laminate stacking sequences, so and so. Okay. In the specimen also there is what is known as the importance of edge, which means the following. So let's draw a laminate. Okay, so let's say this is my composite material. Now at the edge, there will be a tendency of the material to do this. This is one layer, the other layer is going like this. Like you have seen in the edge of a book where there are multiple pages, the pages they start separating from each other. Have you noticed that?
Yes, sir.
That
Yes.
is the edge effect. So that also you have to be careful. And there is some scaling effect which I will talk about in the next few slides. Okay. So what do you mean by scaling effects? So we know that carbon fiber is brittle. We also know that strength of brittle materials, they will follow a Weibull distribution. The strength of a carbon fiber or strength of a glass fiber depends on the defects that have been created on the surface. Some scars or cracks, whatever has happened in the surface of the fiber, that will cause the fiber to fail earlier or later, and which in turn will let my composite material also fail or not fail. So they are going to follow a Weibull distribution. when you have a Weibull distribution, the specimen scale becomes very important. Let's say I have a unidirectional carbon fiber composite and I want to test it. If I have a very small specimen size, okay, so let's say if I have a very small specimen size, let's call it, this is the specimen scale, which is length by breadth, okay, then both the modulus and the strength values will be low. But as I increase my specimen size, it somehow reaches a maximum, and after that it stabilizes. This is happening because my fibers are brittle. Because my fibers are brittle, they are going to follow a Weibull distribution of failure. So, based on this figure, what is the specimen scale that I should use?
More than 5.
More than 5. Otherwise, my data is not reliable. This effect of your composite properties varying as a function of the specimen scale is sometimes known as the scaling effect. Okay.
Sir, how do we define this scale? So can you
How will
repeat
we
that? Define
define
the scale that the x-axis, the numbers on the
is the
x-axis.
ratio of the length to the breadth. So I have a specimen which
Okay.
is something like this. Thickness will be something like this. So what is the length by breadth? You don't want it to be very thin and long. Okay, the second difficulty that we are going to get with composite materials and indeed all anisotropic materials is that there are going to be inhomogeneous stress field where the specimen ends. So because of that, we have to be careful about the length. The length should be equal to omega, which is the specimen width, into square root of Young's modulus by shear modulus. If you don't do this, there will be inhomogeneous stress fields. Okay, for a isotropic material, E by G will be roughly equal to 3. So if your length is 1.7 times the width, you are fine. But for composite materials, to avoid the edge effect, the length has to be at least 6.3 times the width. Again, I will go back to my, so if you don't do that, this point B and C will be very close to the specimen and there are going to be some unwanted damages here. So this homogeneous field in ABCD, if you want to achieve, you have to take care of this formula and accordingly decide the length and width and height of the specimen. This depends on the modulus in the direction of loading and the shear modulus. If your length is smaller than this, then you are going to suffer from premature failure in the grips, delamination at the three edges, and unintended failure mode. Let us say I'm doing a tensile test, but my material failed due to shear. So that sort of thing might happen because you have end effects in anisotropic materials. Okay. And then also the next question that you should logically ask yourself is, what are the materials that you have to test? For isotropic materials, it is easy. You will do a tensile test, you want the Young's modulus and you want the Poisson's ratio. And at best, you want two strengths, tension, compression. Anisotropic, it is much, much more complex. Anisotropic, by definition, composite materials is much, much more complex. Because if it is transversely isotropic, we need 5 elastic constants. If it is orthotropic, I need 9. And strength values is a local property. It is defect sensitive. There will be large scatter, unexpected failure. You are expecting fiber break, suddenly you are seeing matrix cracking or something like that. Long-term behavior is even more difficult. So what are the new challenges that we have introduced due to anisotropic materials? First is there are many values. There are only two values. Second, this is specific for composite materials. Strength is a local property. If one of my fibers was weak and the fiber broke and then there was a crack around that, and that crack will propagate, calling final failure. So there is a large scatter and unexpected failures can occur. So for a strength of a composite material, you will require at least 9 strength values: 3 tensile strength, 3 compressive strength, 3 shear strength. Okay. This actually we'll discuss. I mean, how to use these 9 strengths to calculate the damage of a composite material, how to model a damage of a composite material, provided these 9 values are given, is something that we will do next in the course. I mean, next means after testing, after classical lamination theory is over, this is what we are going to do. So how are you going to prepare your tests? Your test specimens can be produced by pultrusion, filament winding, you can make flat plates. All of this is going to have an influence on the type quality of results that you are going to get. Variation of test is going to depend on how good your fiber alignment is, whether there are voids and defects. Slight variation of the test conditions will lead to large variation in the test results. For example, if your specimen, instead of 0 degree, while putting it in the machine, you put it at 5 degrees, then the modulus change might be 20-30% even. What is the moisture, temperature? Since there is large scatter, you have to test many specimens, and then you say the mean and the standard deviation to be sure. Sometimes for a single property, you might have to do up to 20 tests. How will you decide on the number of tests? So when you do a large number of tests, you will calculate what is known as the standard deviation. And once you know the standard deviation, you will also calculate the confidence limit. What is the bracket in which 90% of your samples are failing? What is the stress range at which 90% of your samples are failing? So you have to rely on that sort of statistics also. These statistics are usually inbuilt in most softwares that you are going to use, whether you use MATLAB or Excel or whatever. There are inbuilt functions for calculating standard deviation, confidence limits, etc., etc. But all of this will become more and more important as you go from isotropic to orthotropic to anisotropic materials. And then the final is, which test standard are you going to use? What should be your sample size? How many tests should you do? All of that will be based on a test standard that you are going to use. Test standards are prescribed, well-defined standards which are defined by different bodies and they are followed. So if you do a test and if you say, I have done this test according to ASTM standard so and so, then that is the property of your material. Everybody is going to recognize. If you just say, I went to the lab and I did this test without following any standards, then your test result is not a good test result. So test standards, when they are defined, it is a compromise between accuracy, repeatability, and cost. The method should be accurate. The method should be repeatable. If that ASTM standard or any other standard is strictly followed, the same result should be derived by different labs, different operators, etc. And the cost and simplicity of the test method is also accounted for. If it's a very difficult test or a very expensive test, not many people are going to do it. Okay. And there are different standardization bodies, which might be, for example, there is the ISO standard. This is an international test standard with no legal implications. If you say I have done tests using ISO standard and later on somebody does the same test and gets different value, you are not legally accountable for this. Is a no legal implications test standard. It could be of multiple countries, like CAN, I think, is the European Union's test standards, or it could be country by country different. So ASTM is American, JIS is Japanese, DIN is German, so BS is British standard. So different countries will define their own test standards. Or it could be sectoral. Automobile industry can have their own test standard, aerospace can have their own test standards, etc. or it could be company wise. For example, Boeing has their own test standards, Airbus has their own test standards, etc., etc. So, and since they are so fierce competitors, if you have developed a new material and you want to Boeing to use it, they will insist that you derive the properties based on their test standards. If you say that, look, I followed Airbus test standards and these are the results that you got, no, they are not going to trust it, and vice versa. This I have had a personal experience. So several years ago, when I was a postdoc, then I was working with a Japanese company who had designed a new type of a composite materials, and part of my job was to test it and then to certify that it is better than the others, which we did. But we use the Airbus standard, and in the US, Boeing exists. So when we showed the test results to Boeing, they refused to trust. They said, we have no trust on the Airbus. If you want us to take your material seriously or to use your material, these are the test standards. Repeat the test with my test standard. So these test standards are taken very, very seriously. You cannot do a test based on whatever sample size you like or whatever lab equipment you have. Rather, a test standard is given where everything will be clearly defined, that this is the width, this is the dimensions, etc., etc., and then you will do the test. And also the choice of the standard that you are going to use is going to depend on which country you are in, which sector are you targeting, which company are you doing the test for, etc., etc. Okay, so here is the conclusion of today's lecture. A test result is never a single value. It is a mean plus minus standard deviation. Composites, when you test, will show large variations. It is fiber alignment, voids, defects, all of this will cause slightly different properties. And every time you make a specimen, there is going to be slightly different voids, slightly different location of defects. So this will cause some variation. Because there is large scattering results, more tests will be needed. You cannot do 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 tests and get reliable values. It could be up to 20 also. And because composites are anisotropic, you have to take care of several things like failure modes, edge effects, end effects. So you have to take special care in the selection of the test method. So with this, I will end today's lecture. Any questions? Anybody?
Sir,
Any
are
question?
there any specific for, are there any specific tests physical applications of I mean, if we put the for longer duration, then is there any UV test or something like that, like we have for metals?
Your voice was cutting. So is your question that is there a specific test for metals? Is that your question?
No, sir. I was saying, very specific test related to the, I mean, environment, I mean, or UV test like that, that we do for metals or
There will
metallic
be test
paints.
standards for everything. If you go to our institute library online, we have free access to the ASTM standards. And if you open that, there are thousands of ASTM. Anything that you can think about measuring, there are ASTM standards almost. From UV testing to scratch test to everything. It is not just tensile test. We are talking in terms of tensile test most of the time, but that's not the only test. I mean, there are literally thousands of standards. So UV, non-destructive testing, how to do micro CT, how do you find out whether, even simple things like how do you test whether or not your nail has penetrated the wall? What should be the width of simple things like that will also have a test standard. Everything has been, now more and more we develop new materials and more new test standards. So this is always a work in progress, but the test standards that already exist are very extensive.
Okay, sir.
In fact, in the next lecture, we will open up a test standard and discuss how it looks like, what are the different heads, what is written in different heads. We will discuss that. Okay, good. Any other question? Anything else? If not, then let us close this lecture. Stop recording.